And I will now turn the meeting over to Reverend Martha, who's going to share some of the excitement that I hear coming up from the Children's RE program and our young adults. Okay. And so I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you, Kathy. Hello, Alliance friends. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to get to be here with you. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening right now in religious education, what this year has been like. I'm going to reflect a little bit about these 2 years that I have been one of your religious educators here at the congregation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what my own pedagogy is around religious education and what some of the values are that underpin the program that I manage here at First Church and what that looks like. And then I will leave some space at the end for questions that you might have. So this has been such an awesome year of religious education. It's part of the context is that the program 2 years ago was sort of struggling a little bit and trying to our children were engaged and also there was a desire, the congregation had expressed a desire to see to engage with the children a little bit more, to create more inter-community relationships between children and adults in the across program areas. So one of the big themes that this year has had is program growth. So last year we had 48 children total registered in the program. This year we have 82. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. So 48 to 82. And that's just children registered in the program. Between children's ministries with religious education and children's choir, and OWL and youth group, we're serving 128 children and youth this year, which is really exciting and really cool, and a lot of growth. So there's a ton of energy, there's a ton of excitement. This year we have 18 regular adult volunteers in religious education. That means classroom teachers, OWL facilitators, and youth group advisors. And coming of age mentors. And we have a bunch of special kind of one-off volunteers, parent volunteers and community volunteers who volunteer for the spaghetti dinners, volunteer to put on different special religious education events and things like that. So those numbers are also increased. Last year we had, I think, 15 adult volunteers, and the year before, I don't know. So that is also reflective of this pattern of growth. Um, that has been really amazing. And it's been this year has been a process of like, oh my gosh, we have so many kids and adults. What are we going to do? How do we manage some of this growth and how do we work together across the congregation? One of the things we're moving to, and I'm saying these sort of numbers, is integration between the children's religious education program at First Church and the children's music program. Historically, the children's music program sort of lives within the music department, as it will continue to do so. But Ian and I are working really hard to bring our departments together. So we've just this week, this is breaking news, we've released a joint shared registration form, which we have historically, these two departments have kept different sets of data about children and youth that we're serving. And we're sharing our data this year. So that sounds a little bit logistical and boring and is like very exciting and cool and reflects a little bit more. Yeah, Miriam, that one's for you. That reflects also the way in which we are trying to align what children's ministry across the congregation looks like. Um, so a little bit of an overview of this year in particular. So this year, for our littlest ones, we had nursery care. For our middle littles, Eleanor Sugarman led a wonderful program called Spirit Play, which is a Montessori style children's exploration program in which children engage with a story, a world's religious tale, a fable, and have time for self-directed play. So that's for children ages 4 to 6. We ran an elementary school program this year as well, that was led by Lori Graham and Doug Masita. The kids loved that. They did a curriculum called Jet Pig Adventures and learned all about our kind of newly articulated set of Unitarian Universalist values: love at the center, justice, equity, interdependence, generosity, transformation, and pluralism. The acronym is Jet Pig. So they design a jetpack for a pig, and then the pig flies around the universe, learning about the values. It's really super fun, and they loved it. And then our middle schoolers in the beginning of the year had a middle school group that was led by Elliot Barnhill, our religious education program assistant, and Doug Masita. And then in the spring, those kids went into OWL. So they completed our fifth and sixth grade level of OWL. We had 17 kids registered in that program this year. And then for our older middle schoolers, they completed the older level of OWL. They're actually still in it. Last Sunday was condom demonstration. So they used condoms like little boomerangs, which was not the intended outcome, but had a lot of fun. And that's been a really great program. Those kids are in the 8th and 9th grade. So our 8th and 9th graders are completing a level of OWL for their age group. And then this year we also had high school youth group. That's another place where we've seen growth. So last year we had 8 kids registered for youth group, and attendance was usually between 3 or 4 to 8 or 9. This year we have 16 kids registered for youth group, and attendance is between 12 to 15 on average on a Sunday. That's been really fun. Those kids have been really engaged. If folks got a chance to either watch live or the recording of the youth-led service from May 3rd, it was really a beautiful service. They did a really excellent job. It's on our YouTube if you want to watch it. The link will be in this week's Unitarian. In particular, one of our youth gave a really beautiful sermon about our Unitarian Universalist values and his take on our shared theology that was really both a beautiful piece of preaching and like a really gorgeous expression of a Unitarian faith. Um, so that was really cool. So that's a little bit of what the program looked like this year. We continued to also run multi-generational events. So we have the monthly spaghetti dinners on the first Monday evening of the month that are super fun. We've been feeding between 110 to 125 plates of spaghetti at each dinner, which is so fun. And some of the children come back for more spaghetti on their same plate. So anyways, that's a nuance of the math. But those have been really fun and a really cool opportunity for new folks to find their way in. Families invite their friends to those because they're just fun and you get dinner. It's also been a really loving and lovely ministry for non-actively parenting people in the congregation to feel that they are ministering to and with our children and families. So dishwashers, pasta chefs, set up and take down crews, dessert bringers. There's been a huge and wonderful effort to put on those dinners. And I've taken a lot of cues from our super lunch and how our super lunches are organized in how that program has been organized. So that's been really cool. There's also a bunch of other multi-generational events. I've worked really closely with the fellowship committee in developing and helping children feel integrated into a lot of their events. So the barn dance and bingo, and there's just like a bunch of fun opportunities for children and youth to get to have relationships with the grown-ups in their community. One of the things, and I'll talk about this more in a second, but one of the things that's really important to me is that church is an expression of the village within which a child is raised. And part of that is children knowing different adults who are in their community so that they have a wide variety of expressions of what being a grown-up looks like and what it means to live as a Unitarian Universalist and what it means to live as an adult. And that there's many different ways to be a person in the world. There's many different ways to grow and to grow up. And so creating intentional space for just children and adults to be in the same place and relationship build is a core sort of part of my own program development. Okay, so that's a little bit about this year. I'm going to talk a little bit about going into the coming year. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the values. So I'm actually in my office, so you can't see this, but this is my curriculum map of the coming year, which has all, pardon me, all of the classes that we're going to run and all of the teachers for all of those classes. So again, we'll be running Spirit Play for our littlest ones under the leadership of Eleanor Sugarman. Our lower elementary school kids, so second to fourth grade, in the fall are going to spend a little bit more time sort of taking the lessons that they learned this year around Unitarian Universalist values and Unitarian Universalist identity formation and clarifying those. So Elliot and I are currently working on the curriculum for the fall, but it's going to be a little bit about what does it mean to belong to a faith that trusts you with your own beliefs and values? What does it mean to belong to a faith where there isn't dogma and there isn't creed, but instead we encourage exploration? So that's going to be the fall for that age group. The spring, those kids are going to do a little bit of biblical literacy. Um, I have been working with our religious education committee on our religious exploration committee. We just renamed ourselves about program outcomes for children and youth. And one of the things that remains important to me is that as a non-Christian denomination with a Christian history in a country where there's a lot of Christianity present and where Christian nationalism and Christofascism is on the rise, it's important to me as a religious educator for our children and youth to have their own literacy around Christian scripture specifically and their own takes and claim to stories that they may hear or encounter in the world. So we're going to do a little bit of that work with that age group. Mostly it's going to be around story exploration. Our middle schoolers, so this program is going to run from the fifth through the eighth grade, are going to complete our Building Bridges Neighboring Faiths program next year, in which they learn about world's religions and the religious traditions of our neighbors here in Belmont. So they'll spend some time learning about and looking at different religious traditions and then visiting different houses of worship in our area. Really excited about that. Also, I have confirmed Marion Westgate and Parrish Dobson as the co-facilitators of that program. And they are so awesome. It's just going to be so much fun. I can't wait. Our eighth and ninth graders will complete OWL again in the spring. And our high schoolers will go into youth group again. One of the things that the kids led on and helped me to design was last year's youth group said, we want a way of welcoming our eighth graders into youth group and helping them to integrate. And so last year, I redesigned our bridging ritual to help the eighth graders come into youth group while the 12th graders go out of it and into the world. So we did that again this year. A month ago, we had an OWL and youth group combined pizza party where eighth graders were invited into youth group. And there were 12 of them that came and kind of tried out youth group, checked it out. It was a blast. They played a rambunctious and insane game of sardines in the whole church, which is their favorite thing to do. But that was really exciting. So on that night, we had 22 kids in youth group, which was really wild and really fun and sort of echoes a history in this congregation of a really large youth group of sort of days past. Youth group is still rebuilding post-pandemic. The kids, one of the things that I've noticed, and I've talked to a lot of other religious educators about this, is that really the forming of a strong youth group starts in fifth grade. And fifth, sixth, seventh grade is where kids sort of gel, connect to each other, connect to church, build a community, and go into a youth group together. And so the first couple years of the pandemic, the youth group really stayed together. Those kids had gelled kind of pre-pandemic. And then the youth group we've had for the past couple years has had a really hard time because they missed some critical religious exploration and faith formation work in middle school. But now we have kids who, again, the past couple years have started to gel and connect to each other in middle school. So one of the things that I spend a lot of my time thinking about is pathways through and across programming for children. So when children come into the congregation as little ones, how do they look at what's coming for them and know what it's going to look like? To say, like, at this age, this is what I can expect. one of our children the other day who was in the musical was saying, okay, someday I'm going to be in youth group and then I'm going to sell candy at concessions at the musical, right? These kind of storytelling and ways of the children being able to look ahead, sort of see what's coming, and how these programs build on each other and create pipelines across the congregation and through faith formation work. Um, so, for example, this year's OWL class, the fifth and sixth graders, really bonded with each other. And so I thought, okay, I need to send them into a program that is similarly really connective. So we chose the Neighboring Faith Building Bridges program for that same group of kids so that hopefully they would continue to build those relationships with each other. They'll go into OWL the next year, coming of age the following year, and then youth group. So having these sort of arcs through the program helps to keep those kids connected to each other, transition them through programming, and land them in places that are recognizable and legible to them. So that's a little bit on arc making. I'm going to pause for a second. It's a lot of information from me. And I'll leave some space at the end for more questions. But before I go into some of the values stuff, any questions about anything that I've gone over so far, religious education this year, last year, programming arcs, etc.?
Um, Martha, is everything for the youth, is there any Sunday evening or is it all a church morning at 11? They're all their programming?
They meet most Sunday evenings at 6:30 to 8:30.
Oh, they still do have Sunday evening.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
great. Great.
They love Sunday evenings. I've tried to move them to other times, and they are really protective of Sunday evenings. They love being at the church in the dark on Sunday evenings, getting ready for their week together.
And then all the other classes, is it just one single session? We don't have 9 and 11, so it's all at 11?
Yeah.
Or is there any
So,
concept of changing that at all?
yeah, great question. So that reminds me to talk about the sort of structure of the month. So, last year and this year, we've run the full slate of age breakdown classes at 11 o'clock only. And then at 9 o'clock, we've run religious education children's chapel style program. So kind of a one-room schoolhouse program with everybody together. Families are increasingly coming to the 11 o'clock service since that's where the bulk of the programming is. The program that I inherited didn't have the kid numbers that made sense to run full religious education programming in both services. So I spent a bunch of time trying to figure this out and think strategically about how to do this. Now we've sort of funneled a lot of families into the 11 o'clock service. The 9 o'clock service, especially with the music changes, the 9 o'clock service just has a really different vibe. So the 11 o'clock service often has a lot more kids and families, a much different energy level. The 9 o'clock service tends to be like a lot gentler, of an energetic level. And I'm noticing people sort of self-select as the two worship services like increasingly shift in style. I'm noticing people self-select into them. So again, for the last 2 years, I've run a children's chapel, one-room schoolhouse style program in 11 o'clock. We're sort of rethinking what that might look like just because there's really not a lot of kids that come to that program. So the structure of the month, and this will help me lead into the conversation around the values that sort of underpin the program. But something that's really important to me is multi-generational worship, in that children are invited into worship explicitly, and that children are taught that worship is a practice for them and a place for them. Um, one of the patterns that we see in Unitarian Universalism nationwide, is that we raise a ton of kids UU that don't necessarily become worship-going Unitarian Universalist adults. Many of our children do, but many of our children do not. And one of the reasons for that is that we often don't invite children explicitly into Sunday morning worship, or teach them that it is for them. So we see a lot of children leave Unitarian Universalism. So something that's important to me, not just because Part of my goal is raising Unitarian Universalists, but also because I think it's good for all of us to be in church life together. Age diversity is one of the places where we practice what radical inclusion actually looks like and actually means. And it is hard to do. It is hard to create worship experiences that fit all types of learners and all types of worshipers. And I think it's really good practice for us to remember that there are those of us who only come to Sunday morning church because we love to sing. There's those of us who only come to Sunday morning church because we're interested in like an intellectual sermon. And there's those of us who only come to Sunday morning church in order to get to coffee hour afterwards and talk to our friends. And like each one of us sort of arrives at Sunday morning worship with a different set of spiritual needs. And our children and youth are no different. And so multi-generational worship is a practice of radical inclusion. I have brought more multi-generational worship to First Church in Belmont than I think is common. So the structure of the program, as it falls under my own leadership, is that we do multi-generational worship once a month. So once a month, children are explicitly invited into worship. We do our best to shift worship structure a little bit to be inclusive of the presence of children and youth there, and to sort of get at those developmental needs of all of us. I did some really interesting work when I was in seminary around disability justice and disability inclusion in Sunday morning church. And age diversity is a really, really good strategy for practicing disability inclusion and for a congregation being able to access cultural practices that lead to disability justice and inclusion by practicing age diversity. One of the reasons is disruption. Sometimes children and youth are disruptive in worship, and us practicing increasing our comfort with a little bit of disruption also helps us to include community members of ours who may also practice disruption. So that's one of the ways in which kind of radical inclusion can work with age diversity. It's a long-winded answer. So multi-generational worship once a month. Once a month, I run a program called Children's Chapel, which is all kids all together. And often that is a special, something special. So like we did an Earth Day seed planting workshop when we needed to do some kind of spiritual grief work about the beech tree. We did it in Children's Chapel all together. One time our friend Lainey came with a service dog and we learned about service dogs and what are they learning and how to interact with one in public. Special programs like that happen in Children's Chapel, so that's once a month, everybody together. Another of the intentions for that for me is that I want the children to also create and build community across their ages within church. So the little ones and the big ones feeling that they are one community of children together. And then twice a month is when we have religious education classes broken down over that, over the types of classes that I talked to you about a little bit earlier. So that's what the month looks like. One Sunday a month, we all go to church. One Sunday a month, we're all together in one class, and 2 Sundays a month, we're in age broken down classes. That helps to meet some of the different developmental and religious exploration needs of different types of learners and different types of brains. It also helps me with volunteer recruitment because I ask our regular Sunday morning teachers to teach twice a month, which is an easier volunteer ask to commit to than teaching Sunday school every month and not being able to access Sunday morning worship. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Nicole.
I wonder, have you thought of what there were 2 things they did in the past long ago. One was that at one point, we had an extended family years and years ago that we created. So basically I'm not suggesting we do that again. However, the good part was that some of the kids were really matched. They matched themselves, so they were matched with adults. So some of the adults were very old, some were much younger, whatever. And that was outside of the church during various celebrations that people have. Or, for example, going on a bicycle ride with somebody. I don't know, but this had worked very well. And these kids as far as I know, continued later on. Now, that's one thing. And then the other thing is that also there may be amongst the teenagers kids who have skills that they would like to share and maybe even be paid for. So these these things were done in the past, but I'm old, so it happened a long time ago. But it worked very well, and they even had not that long ago, a grandparents' day where they invited people, and there are several things like that, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. I love both of those suggestions. So to the second one, that actually reminded me to talk about something I hadn't mentioned yet, which is that I offer Sunday morning childcare jobs to members of the youth group. So currently there are 11 teenagers from the youth group who work in the Sunday morning religious education program. When I started, there were 4, and last year we had 5, and this year we have 11, which was really cool. And I pay them to do Sunday morning childcare, which is really cool because then they get to form relationships with the little ones and they're present on Sunday morning. They also help in class. And Lila, one of our teenagers, recently wrote a whole lesson and brought it to me and was like, "Can I teach this?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So for Children's Chapel that month, Lila was the teacher, and we had an adult volunteer who cares about youth empowerment the same as I, and that adult volunteer said, "I'll be Lila's classroom helper." So instead of an adult leader and a teenage classroom helper, Lila, the teenager, was the teacher, and an adult volunteer was the classroom helper, which was awesome. And then to your first idea, I have also spent a bunch of time thinking about relationship building frameworks between children and adults. And I haven't run anything specifically about individual relationships so far, besides coming of age. But 2 programs I've done at congregations in the past. One is called Pew Buddies, where a family gets matched with an older adult in the congregation to sit together in Sunday morning church during multi-gen worships. The other is called Mystery Friends, which is a pen pal program where adults get matched with children to write, and the children don't know which adult they have, and so they write these kind of fun pen pal letters back and forth. I've been working on a lot of structure. So once that structure is in place, hopefully there will be time for some of those kinds of projects. Lanier, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's not a question, but I'm just very glad to hear that there's going to be some, maybe not emphasis, but inclusion of discussion of the Christian background of, the heritage that we live in. Because I think having biblical illiteracy is not a good idea in this day and age. I think it's better for kids to have some exposure, so it's not something that's so foreign to them that they feel uncomfortable or don't feel that they can challenge or question. I just think it's very good to include that. So thank you for having that. I know in the past we have, but I don't know if it's included every year or for every group of kids who comes through.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. It is important to me, and I think increasingly it is politically important and
Yeah.
salient to have this be included as part of the education. And yes, it was a core piece of how religious education used to be done in this congregation, and I think we haven't really touched the Bible in a minute. It's always included in neighboring faiths, but this is doing actually like a deep dive specifically in Christian frameworks. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so I'm going to jump into talking a little bit about values, and then again, I'll leave some more time for questions. So, you have heard me say faith formation and religious exploration. Both of those are terms that we use in this program. My title, I'm the Minister for Faith Formation. Part of why we use that language is to sort of indicate that this is not instruction. This is not necessarily moral instruction, but what we do across our programs is children and adults are forming a spiritual and religious identity. And that happens over your whole life, in different ways at different times, as is developmentally appropriate for our different ages. We also use the term religious exploration, often in place of religious education. I use those terms pretty interchangeably, but we're sort of moving towards using religious exploration. Part of that is also about the pedagogy that children are their own seekers and we trust them. We believe in the wisdom that they have. We don't believe that children are empty vessels waiting to be filled with religious knowledge. We believe that they are experts in their own life experience and that their life experience is a source of spiritual wisdom and is their life experience is also sacred text. And so religious exploration is sort of used to indicate that they are seeking and that we are seeking alongside them. So that's like a little bit about language. I have some pretty specific values as a religious educator. One is that I learned from the religious educator Maria Harris in her text Fashion Me a People, is that the congregation is the curriculum. So the highest and most important curriculum that I have is you all, is the congregation itself. And children are learning all the time by being members of a community what it means to belong to a community. So in how I do program development and in how I do program integration, this is a guiding star for me, is that the congregation is the curriculum and they are learning from and with you all the time. Another is that the young people get to lead. So I ask them questions, I check in with them about what they want to learn, what they're experiencing, what they're thinking about. Our youth actually recently talked to me about something that they think about and worry about is children's safety online. And they're worried about children younger than them and their own safety online. So that's giving me something to think about online literacy, digital literacy, exploring online. What are some kind of like tech navigation skills that we may need as people of faith interacting with a changing world? The work that I did recently about some grief and release of the beech tree, that came from the wisdom of a child. A child came to me and told me that she was feeling really, really sad about the tree. And so all of that project sort of was following her leadership and the wisdom of her emotional experience. So young people lead. There is a religious educator named Angus MacLean, a universalist from our history. And one of the things that I learned from him is that the method is the message. So the way that we teach, the way that we treat children, the way that we instruct, the way that we include them in congregational life is what they are learning. So I care less about the specific lessons that we teach and more how children feel when they're here and how adults treat them. There's huge learning in the way that they are treated and the way they are included in congregational life. And then the last one is the value of multi-generational relationships of learning where learning flows both directions. So children are learning from adults, but adults are also learning from children. And we do some of this good practice in multi-generational space. So those are a couple of my core values. I often use a religious education framework that comes from my colleague Kimberly Sweeney. That's the 4 C's of faith formation. They are curriculum, covenant, community, and call. So curriculum is what they learn. This is the question about like, do we study the Bible and how and in what way? That falls into this curriculum bucket. How we learn about Unitarian Universalist values, how we learn about world's religions, sexuality education. We've had losses in the community and the children have had losses. We just had a couple of families have significant pet death in the last year or two. And so we're working on some curriculum around grief and death and dying. So there's some curriculum questions about what children learn. Covenant, how we learn to be a people of covenant and to practice covenant with one another. Our children make a classroom covenant every year as the first lesson. And then we touch that covenant throughout the whole year about how we're learning to be in aspirational, promised relationship with one another. Community, what does it mean to feel like you are a part of a community, to belong to a community, to be and create a community for each other? Often with our younger kids, we're teaching them through our actions and through our modeling what being a community member looks like. And then in youth group, I watch those kids really bring out their own skills and teach one another what community looks like and then build community for themselves. And then the last one is call. This is really important, and I think about this a lot with our children and youth. What does it feel like to be called? What is their own call? How do they hear it? What are the stirrings within their hearts that tells them what is their work to do in the world that is theirs to do and theirs alone? How do they learn to listen to that call? How do they learn to hear it? How do they learn to bring that call out and live it in the world? We do some really juicy work on this in coming of age, but we also do this work in other programmatic areas of, we used to in religious education call this finding your thunder, but now I understand it more to be this language around call. So those are some other values that help me. And then the last thing I'll say on this is that I have worked really intentionally with our religious exploration committee to clarify some program outcomes, some aspirations that we have for when children are leaving our community at age 18 or whenever that is. So one of my goals is to develop lifelong love of Unitarian Universalism for our children and youth to understand that this is something that they have to hold on to, that there is a richness of theology and practice and covenant and community here that is skill building for them and that is home for them no matter where they go in the world. We want to honor the developmental needs of young people across their lives and honor their questions with comfort and community and companionship. I want them to explore who they are and what they believe, and as they age, have clarity of what is important to them and how those beliefs and values work in their lives. And I want them to know that two things that are sort of our first and third and seventh Unitarian Universalist principles. But I want our children to know that each one of them is worthy and loved exactly as they are, that they belong in this world and in this community, and that they're connected to all beings in all places and times. So those are the things that I hope that they learn while they are a part of this program and as they journey out of this program and into the world. Okay. So that's a bunch of things from me about values. We have only a few minutes left, but any questions or reflections from any of that piece?
I have something to tell you, and it's a story about
Please.
my older daughter. And Kathy and Jean also had children in that cohort. When we came to First Church, she was in first grade, and her RE class was her, one other girl, and 14 boys. She went out and recruited 4 of her friends to come.
That's so funny.
That cohort went through, and then she graduated from youth group, went off to college, and she went to Syracuse, and she was looking for a social group that did not center entirely around the fraternity parties.
Mm-hmm.
And she looked at her friends and saw the ones that had something that anchored them was the Baptist campus ministry kids. And she said, well, I'm not Baptist, but I could start a youth group. So she did, modeled on the one from First Church.
Wow.
And I told in the receiving line on May 3rd, I told the kids, go off to college and start a youth group. Now, she
Oh,
happened to be in a
awesome.
particularly advantageous situation because her freshman advisor, who ended up being her advisor in her major, was a UU and helped her start it. It was the faculty sponsor and also connected her to the local UU church,
Mm,
which gave them some resources.
mm,
So
that's so
anyway, that's my story about building that sense of community and belonging
yeah.
among the youth, that it carries out into the wider world.
Absolutely. I mean, that is what I want them to know and have experienced in youth group is that they can create communities of belonging for themselves and that they have the skills to do it that are centered around shared value. Because I think that this is something that all people are seeking community right now and always. But in our world, there are lots of communities that seek folks in ways that sometimes are exploitative. And so I want our kids to be grounded with the skills to be able to determine if a community is for them and what the values are at the heart of that community, and to create and build it for themselves.
And then to finish the story, when she landed in Philadelphia for grad school, not knowing anybody, she discovered the young adult group at the First Church of Philadelphia.
Mm.
She served a couple of years as treasurer there, and which people are laughing because I was treasurer of First Church for 5 years. And she's now on the building committee because she's an architect.
Mm. That's
So
awesome. That's lifelong love of Unitarian Universalism, man.
I also feel that when they're learning together and be together, later on in life, that friendship can carry on. And for example, our son, who's, I mean, he's in his 50s, late 50s, is still friendly with some of the kids in his RE group, even though it was a tight thing, and they're friends. They live far apart, but they know each other quite well.
Mm.
So that's also another plus that they get, which is support and emotional support if need. And by the way, he is now our son who was raised UU in our church. He's now co-president of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Paris.
Wow,
So,
that's so cool.
it carries on.
That's awesome. Thanks for being here, Colleen. Yeah, Kathy, go ahead.
I just wanted to not let your program go by without thanking you for your love of the children, for your respect of the children, and for helping us value uh, all of them. And in particular, the first thing I do remember is your opening up of the parlor with play space and for the children can come and go, and always letting us as the people sitting in the pews to recognize that all of the sounds and emotions of the children are very valued and which was a very very wonderful loving way of saying don't try to shush them. It meant a lot to me, and I can see in your enthusiasm and openness about really getting to the core of them. And I know from my own grandchildren how much you're like the Pied Piper. They just want to follow you and be Velcro to you everywhere. And my own daughter, when she was in about seventh grade, came home one day, and she said from lunch, and she said, I'm so glad I'm a UU. And as a parent, you're like, well, what's this about? And she commented that many of her friends went to St. Joseph's and were beginning to question some of the dogma they were being instructed about. And she was so glad that she was encouraged to question, and as they were frightened of the questions that were coming up. So, and my own son David, who many of you know well, when he went off to college, he found a UU group at University of Wisconsin, and he said the only thing is that we didn't blow out the candle on the count of three. We blew it out on the count of one. And, but it was really, really nice to know that it was something that followed him, and he's as involved as he can with our church today. So anyway, thank you.
On
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sunday, the way when you tell the stories and the little children are in front, I think it's wonderful. And I noticed also the way if they don't know what to do, whatever, eventually they're very nice. They're quiet. They're just like our own kids in our own homes, or grandchildren, in my case. And kids don't stay put. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And I also like the sound of the babies
Mhm.
if they're not
Yeah.
crying. And this is adorable. And we are a community, and a community can only thrive if little ones are there, because they're the ones that are going to
Yeah.
grow up and be replacing us. So
If the babies are crying, then the church isn't dying.
Well, thank
Jean,
you.
did you want
I
to?
just wanted to thank you that I thought this was so wonderful. I think this should be
Thank-
required viewing because it really, no, seriously, it really provided the framework and the intentionality and the arc of what we are as a community. And I just, I'm really thankful to have listened to this. And my kids are gone, but I love the intergenerational thing and connecting with the kids and the spaghetti dinners and you mentioned, there was Easter and Halloween and people are invited to come even though you don't have kids to witness that. And one suggestion, even Ash, who mentioned at church that they were looking for some help, and so I was like, oh, you should get in hold of so and so, and not to give you more work, but an interesting concept because we have the alumni who come back for the I always go to the late service for Christmas Eve because
Yeah.
they come, but the concept of even maybe kids signing up for a monthly newsletter that is an alumni what's going on, or they could share a story or something, but it's that sense of keeping them connected. They're probably not going to read the entire Unitarian, but if
Right.
there's something that might be youth oriented that they could share about their lives, um, just a thought. Anyway, thank you so much.
I love that thought. Thank you, Jean. I know one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you all and laid it out in this way is I work on this program with a lot of intention, right? Children are not just here, and like they matter, and their experience of church matters, and there's a lot of intention with how we meet them where they're at. And that is important to me. So, thank you so much, Alliance, for having me and giving me this time and this platform. I'm really grateful for you all and grateful for your partnership in this. I experience just education and exploration as a product of all of us together, and you all are important pieces of that. So,
Thank you
thank you,
very
and I
much.
thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thank you.
folks.
Thank you,
Friends.
Martha.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
Bye,
day.
everyone.
everyone.
And we look
Bye-bye.
forward to seeing people in the fall at our upcoming Alliance programs and have a safe summer and a fun summer. And
And
thank you.
For all the programming.
who
Yeah.
knows,
Bye-bye.
later on, maybe next year, you might have something to add to what you just said today. So I'm looking forward to that. And indeed, I agree with Jean that what you presented today should be not only available for all the members of the church to view, but also encouraged to understand so that they know what's going on. Because people can't just make an assessment of something they don't know.
Right.
And that's very important. So maybe even we should find a way to suggest kindly and nicely for this to be viewed. Well, thank you very much. And
I appreciate that. Thank you, friends. Nice to be with you.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
thank
And a
you. Thank
reminder,
you.
this was recorded and it will be posted on the church website. So if you want to share what she had to say with your friends and relatives, that would be great.
thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye, Mark.